One of the most frequent questions that I get here on the channel is where should I begin in studying Western esotericism, at least from an academic perspective, which is the only perspective I can really offer. Well, the short answer is mostly books, because there aren't many institutions that teach this material, just a handful really. And one of the really central problems of studying this topic is that we always begin kind of in the middle of things. And to make matters worse, so much of the literature about Western esotericism is, let's be diplomatic and call it uneven. So after a few years of thinking about this, I've decided to come up with, and this video update is part of that, what I think is a very solid core library of Western esotericism, or at least the Western esotericism that I have some expertise in and is covered by this channel. This list that I'm going to go over with you in this episode will provide you what I really believe is a solid, academically rigorous bibliography from which you can begin or extend your own library of esotericism. So let's explore my top tier must-haves, the list generally, and most importantly really how I came to the decisions of what's on this list and what's aren't in this library of Esoterica. If you're interested in magic, hermetic philosophy, alchemy, Kabbalah, or the history of the occult, the kind of material that we cover here, I'd hope you to subscribe here to Esoterica and check out some of my other content on topics here. Also, if you want to support this kind of work of providing accessible, scholarly, and free content on topics in esotericism, I'd hope you consider taking a look at my Patreon, perhaps a one-time donation, or just use some of the super thanks that you can find below, or picking up some of the cool merch that we have on the store. Again, all of your help really does make this channel possible. But now let's build a library of Esoterica, or kind of if I knew then what I know now, how would I have built my library of esotericism? I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and welcome to Esoterica, where we explore the arcane in history, philosophy, and religion. In my experience, people into esotericism are also people who love books. The older, the better. The older book smelling, the better. But buying books in the field of Western esotericism can be downright fraught. The material ranges from extreme academic specialized monographs to really good practitioner-oriented material, from solid scholarship to downright rubbish not worthy of being contributed to a dumpster fire. From great introductions and overviews to extremely specialized monographs, even antiquarian volumes simply out of want for modern editions, much less translations. I literally have to buy 17th century editions sometime just to get access to a book at all. Further, the field of Western esotericism is so broad and interdisciplinary that it's often hard to follow the scholarship from subject to subject, from alchemy to witchcraft to medieval magic to ancient Gnosticism. But that's precisely the task, and trust me, I know your pain. I have spent decades trying to parse this field, buying books that ended up going either way over my head, or they were too highly specialized from the time period that I was looking at, or my knowledge of the subject matter, to getting something that looked promising and then it only turned out to be long-form, demented ravings. Like a, Facebook rant in all caps from that insane uncles of yours. It's hard out there for someone interested in Western esotericism wanting reliable, accessible, and scholarly work. In fact, that's precisely why I started this channel at all. Why almost every episode of Esoterica concludes with further book recommendations. One, because I want you to be able to check my sources, because also no YouTube video, no matter how good it is, will ever be exhaustive of a subject. An Esoterica video is a place to start an intellectual journey. It's never a place to conclude one. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I get asked all the time for book recommendations, and especially for foundational or essential or lay of the land texts. So that's what I've tried to create in this living document that I'm calling the Esoterica Library. But before turning to the library, as much as it is, the links which you can find down in the description and in the comment if you want to go check those out now, I want to talk a bit about the methodology by which I came up with this list. Why? Because methodology is often just as important, if not more important, than outcomes, in my opinion. And it informs why I did what I did and why certain things are on this list and certain things aren't. I mean, you might not. You probably won't agree with all my decisions, or you may just wonder why I made them the way that I did, but at least you deserve to understand my reasoning, and I hope that gives you solid ideas about why I did what I did and why what's on here is on here. So, a bit of methodology. First, this list is overwhelmingly academic in nature. Why? Well, because I'm an academic, and that's kind of what I know. It's as simple as that. Further, because academic texts are subject to peer review, and why peer review is far from perfect, that process at least lets us know that the community of scholarship has vetted the book and its information. So, for better and for worse, these texts do represent at some level the general consensus, or at least the debates around consensus, of where academic scholarship is at a given time on a specific topic. Of course, that's going to shift. And in fact, I include some very important volumes, such as those by Dame Frances Yates or Lynn Thorndike, that are incredibly important, but have definitely been superseded by new generations of scholarship. And just to be honest, the truth about any topic isn't created through a consensus of academics or anyone else for that matter. I've also included some non-academic texts whose scholarship is, to my mind, extremely well done and very serious, and those texts are often the work of practitioners. These texts will give you access to the state of the field, they'll allow you the informed opinions about that state, and you can agree or disagree thoughtfully as you become part of that conversation. And that's what matters, you becoming part of a conversation. But don't be fooled, no book in this field is ever going to somehow prove definitive, mostly because the field of Western Esotericism is still very much in its infancy, and this whole channel is going to become irrelevant in like 25 years. It's already becoming irrelevant, probably. Secondly, virtually none of these volumes are practitioner-oriented. Why? Well, very simply, I don't have that expertise. I just don't. I'm creating this reference to make you better informed about the history, philosophy, and religious nature of these topics, and not really to teach you how to practice alchemy or magic or Kabbalah or astrology for that matter. I'm just not a practitioner, and it would just be flatly inappropriate for me to make such recommendations to you. However, I would argue that any practitioner or religious person more generally would just greatly benefit from having a firm foundational understanding of the historical context, the philosophical and the religious development, along with the textual and linguistic history of any of this material. Religion, spirituality, and philosophy should be deepened, I think, by critical historical analysis, and religions and spiritualities which resist historical critical analysis are, at least to my mind, pretty suspect. I mean, this list isn't going to make you a wizard, but I wouldn't take any wizard too seriously that doesn't have a command over a pretty decent chunk of this material. For practitioners out there watching, I'd really be curious to see what kind of list you would put together in your respective fields. I would love to see that list. I would certainly benefit from it, and I imagine out there many of you would as well. I've also selected works that are primarily in English. That's just because that's the overwhelming majority of the viewers of this channel's native, and often just only language. But there is a ton of extremely important scholarship in this field, especially in French, Italian, and German, but a great many texts are still even just only available in their original Latin or Greek or whatever languages. I may expand this list to include contemporary non-English literature, but I'm not sure quite yet if I'll do that. But speaking of languages, I've also included some resources for you to begin to do the work of learning French and German, at least at the reading level, but also the range of classical languages such as Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Coptic, etc. Learning to read these texts in their original languages is simply indispensable for this field. Again, recall that language itself is metaphysically important to this entire tradition or discourses, and reading in translations alone is never really going to be sufficient to get a deep understanding of this material, so check out the end of our list for some language learning resources. Another criteria that I've tried to select for in these volumes is that they're all academically rigorous without being overly specialized, that they're foundational and introductory at the same time without being too much in depth too quickly. It's important to get a lay of the land before diving into extremely specialized monographs. And nearly all of these texts are organized to eventually allow you to do just that. Now, that's not to say these texts aren't rigorous and sometimes difficult. They definitely are. But they aren't 500-page deep dives on one school of Gnosticism, or 500-page analysis of every manuscript of the Zohar in its printing transmission. That's all important, of course, but you'll come to those texts as you work your way up in expertise and by consulting the bibliographies of the volumes in this list. Yeah, your best jumping off point from this list is going to be the bibliographies of these very books, so consult those early and often and after you finish reading these books. A kind of logical financial corollary to this point, in that I've not chosen extremely specialized text for this list, is that I've also tried to select for books that are basically affordable. Now that's a pretty relative benchmark given that I've tried to cut out all of these extremely expensive $300, $500, $800 books from Brill and Breppels, not because they're not important. They are important and you'll need to access them at some point, somehow. But are these books on the list cheap? No. They're not. Academic publishing is a cartel that scams both the authors that write for them and the book buyers, that is you, and people should develop curses for them. Though, I'll be honest, once you move a bit deeper than this list, the specialization and the price of books is going to jump an order of magnitude. $30 books are going to become $300 books really fast. But I bet you guys out there are pretty resourceful, and I bet you can conjure these books through either magical means or by sailing the high seas. Another limitation of mine you can see in this list is that the time covered by the list. Basically, I've tried to cover topics in things like the ancient Near East, up through Greco-Roman times, the medieval period, the Renaissance, and early modern Latin Western literature, with the list basically wrapping up sometime in the 17th century with Theosophy and Rosicrucianism, at least at this point. Why there? Why not cover more contemporary stuff? Well, that's basically because that's where the channel primarily focuses, and that's because my expertise simply doesn't run into contemporary occultism. But at this point, the list is already 34 pages long. It's the better part of a lifetime worth of reading, and I'm hoping to eventually build out a more contemporary list, either with myself or with some help from colleagues, or just let them do it, given the fact that that's their realm of expertise and they would do it far better than me. I've also selected for availability as much as I can. The study of Western Esotericism has always been marginalized since we transitioned from the good old days of the Inquisition to now the equally good old days of the ivory tower academic days. And many important texts, despite being foundational, received very small print runs and remain long out of print. For instance, the most important study of Cornelius Agrippa and his occult philosophy is now half a century old, and it's out of print. So you've got to find some out-of-print books, but I'm not going to include a lot of those in this list. However, I'm going to make one exception to this rule. If you can, through whatever means available to you, not gangster stuff, but, obtain a copy of Thorndike's A History of Magic and Experimental Science in 8 volumes. It's extremely worth it. Go find it if you can. There's simply no more comprehensive study like this, and while it's not perfect, scholars to this day still admit that we're just filling in gaps to this profound monument of a work. They do go to auction from time to time. Libraries do sell copies of theirs, but this is one of those sets of out-of-print books that's of such foundation importance that I would highly encourage you to find a set. Finally, this list is designed and organized to empower you to educate yourself. Some of the guiding principles for this list were something like, if I were doing a short introductory seminar at a upper level undergraduate or lower level graduate level, what would be the absolute recommended reading for that class? Or what are the minimal but essential texts on a subject for someone that they need to have on their shelf for a given topic? Or, given what I know now, how would I actually build up my own library from the foundations up on these topics? I mean, there are just so few institutions of learning that make this information accessible. There's so much misinformation online, and in print for that matter, and so much gatekeeping by both academics and pseudo-guru types that can make some of its information feel extremely and profoundly misdirected and disempowered. We can feel misdirected and disempowered, and this list is meant to do the exact opposite of that. It's meant to empower you to become the best educator that you're ever going to get. You. Every one of these books can be read and understood by nearly anyone watching this channel with a little work. Well, with a medium amount of work. You absolutely can do that, and you can dive as deep as you want to into this material. You can learn these ancient languages, and you can read text in the original language, and you can become highly proficient in this field as long as you're willing to do the work and you have a relatively good library card. Don't let this list intimidate you. Let it be an opportunity, even a challenge, an invitation for you to start or deepen your learning. Don't try to become an expert on everything all at once. Follow your passion for learning, pick a subject that speaks to you, and see where the literature takes you. I just want this list to empower and inspire you, so let's see a little bit about what's on the list. There are two core texts I would suggest that everyone own and everyone read a few times before getting more granular in the field. The first is Nicholas Goodrick Clarke's The Western Esoteric Traditions. While admittedly dated, it's about 20 years old at this point and by no means perfect. I mean, the entire Middle Ages are just kind of skipped by Middle Ages. This volume remains one of the best bird's eye view of historical overviews of the field, and it gives you a lay of the land of the major figures, the major movements, and the major ideas in one relatively compact volume. Again, this is a mile wide and an inch deep, but it's still an important and solid historical introduction. But if you're willing to push a bit deeper, but not yet to monograph level deep, into the specific areas of interest, I would really check out the essays in the Cambridge Handbook of Western Mysticism and Esotericism. But the next volume I would absolutely work through cover to cover at least a couple of times is Wouter Hanegraaff's Esotericism in Western Culture, Counternormativity, and Rejected Knowledge. Here we have both another historical overview, but a much deeper dive into the wider world of the philosophical and methodological issues at stake in the study of Western esotericism. In effect, this is the volume that brings you up to speed of where the field is right now, at least in 2026, and it is indispensable for you to go work your way through. Do it. Buy it. Work through it. After giving the Goodrick Clarke and the Hanegraaff text a couple of good reads, now you'll either want to deepen your impression of the field more generally, or beginning drilling down into specific subject areas. If you want a deeper understanding of the field more broadly, I've created two groups of foundational texts. One group focuses on primary text and reliable translations on many aspects of Western esotericism. These primary texts should be read in unison with the appropriate secondary literature, which helps to explain, situate, and contextualize the primary texts. Overall, this comprises a library of about 30 books, which I would take to form the core, at least to my mind, of a world-class library on the study of Western esotericism prior to about 1650. Represented here is everything from the most basic foundational text is virtually every aspect of Western esotericism, including magic at different historical periods, alchemy, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, historical heresy, the witch trials, Kabbalah, and a lot more. I'm also sure that many of you have many of these books, but maybe there's a few of them that you've not heard of or that you need to get. But again, work dialectically between the primary and the secondary literature as carefully and as systematically as you can. Now, I think I've read every single one of these books at least a few times, and I'm still picking them up and rereading them and finding new things on rereading. It's worth reading them, marking them up, filling up notebooks, so much that you need to buy new copies just to mark them up again. And trust me, I have multiple copies of the same book marked up multiple times, having read them multiple times. Finally, assuming that you have the more foundational text, or now you want to drill down into specific subfields, I provided what I take to be some of the more foundational texts in those domains. Now, I'll admit the distribution here isn't totally right, and I'm still working on getting what seems like a more solid fit, but I think these texts do represent the absolutely essential text that, again, I would put on a syllabus if I were doing a brief intro level, but still very serious seminar on these topics. Now, again, they're not by any means exhaustive. This list is meant to be, by definition, a kind of essential list, but not an exhaustive one. But I think a solid foundation on these topics just the same. But from these texts, you should be able to dive even deeper into those highly specialized monographs and articles that are going to cost you a lot unless you're willing to pirate them. I'm also working to put together a list of specialized publishers and journals to get the lay of the land better, but you can find that exact list if you want it at the very end of Hanegraaff's book. But this reading list or bibliography represents, I think, a solid resource for anyone in the beginning to intermediate stages of their exploration of texts and literature and traditions and ideas of Western esotericism up to about 1650. Of course, this list is not perfect, and if you think there's something that I should remove or add, go again, only given the methodology that I've outlined earlier, let me know down in the comments below. I'm happy to alter the list based on good argumentation. I'm going to try to collaborate further on expanding this list and creating another post-1650-ish list and prepare for a list of important non-English monographs, so keep an eye on that when I get time to actually make that list. But I hope this Esoterica library project is helpful to all of you out there in the process of building up your own library, building up a library that empowers you on your educational, spiritual, or philosophical paths, or just because you want to make better novels or D&D games. Those are all noble ends. But for transparency's sakes, the links in the actual documents are affiliate links, and I do get a small cut of any books that you end up purchasing from Amazon. But of course, if you don't want to purchase from Amazon, I would encourage you not to. They are kind of an evil corporation, but this is the way of the world. As you imagine, this list did take me a long time to put together, so if you can make the purchases, that would be great so I could at least get a small cut of it. But again, you should do what you think is right for you. As the Mutus Liber tells us, ora lege, 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 re lege, labora et invenias. Pray, read, 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 reread, work, and then you shall discover. Until next time, I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and thank you for watching Esoterica, where we explore the arcane in history, philosophy, and religion.